Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. I'm Lara Downs, and this is a panel on building your brand. I am a pianist, and I was a laureate. I am a laureate of the Sphinx Medal of Excellence from last year, which was a tremendous honor and a privilege. I just wanted to start off by saying, yesterday I was at the classical radio station here doing an interview, and he asked about this panel today, and I said, yeah, we're talking about building your brand. He said, that sounds really complicated. And I said, no, not at all. It's just a question of knowing who you are and telling other people about it. And he said, yeah, that sounds really complicated. And it is. It's a big question. And I think we have a lot to talk about today. So we're each going to take a few minutes and just talk about how we have developed our brands. And really for the purpose of this conversation, you know, what I said yesterday I think is very much true, that building your brand means knowing who you are. So we really could substitute the word self for brand. And building that, knowing that, is a lifelong process of evolution and change and self-knowledge. So I'll just talk a little bit about how this brand, or this me, developed and where it's going. I think that pretty much everything that I've done in my career goes back to my very weird childhood. I was raised in so many ways that were unconventional. Primarily, I think at the heart of everything that I am about learning and doing, I was homeschooled. And I had no idea that there were really very much in the way of structures in the world. My education was very haphazard and very enthusiastic and kind of hit or miss, and sort of anything that we wanted to learn, we could learn. And I still have that belief. In fact, I have 2 kids now, and it wasn't until my second child started kindergarten and I realized that they were doing the same thing that I realized there is such a thing as a curriculum in the world. So I tend to think that anything I want to do or learn, I can do. And so when I look back, the brand that I've built, the self that I've built, really has a lot to do with unawareness of boundaries, which has served me very well. When I first started, I had this kind of last of the dinosaurs story of a real career boost. I had been studying abroad for years. I grew up in California, and then I was in Europe for years studying, and I came to New York. I was very young, and I won a competition, and I had a concert in the small hall at Carnegie, and there was a gentleman there who had a record label who said, I would love to have you make a record for me. I had no idea that this was, you know, such a rare opportunity. I also had no idea that I really should sort of just shut up and do what other people told me to do. So when we started talking about what I wanted to record, I had this idea about a story album. I've always thought of music making in terms of storytelling and theme building and kind of putting context around the record. This was long enough ago that the answer to that was, well, you can't do that because in the record store there are bins and they have composer names on them, and then there's another bin that says miscellaneous, and you don't want to be in that bin. But I prevailed, and I put out a record that had a theme, a story around it, and I have continued to do that all of these years. And I think that my brand, such as it is, has very much to do with communicating about music, storytelling around music. Everything that has built into that, I think, really comes down to allowing myself to know myself and to incorporate things that are of interest to me. So I am a pianist. I'm also a writer. I'm a broadcaster. I am a mentor. I'm a communicator. I'm really passionate about building my audience, and I've realized that there are so many ways to do that. One of the recent examples is that I was writing liner notes for an album a couple of years ago, and the decision was made at the label to actually bring in somebody else to write the notes, but I had started writing these notes, and I had them on my computer, and I sort of started expanding them, and they turned into this very sort of raw autobiographical piece about my life, about all the things I'm talking about, my life and all the, you know, the weirdness of it and everything that has led me on my musical path. And I was kind of shocked by it, and I sent it to a writer friend, and he sent it to an editor, and it ended up being published in a couple of journals. One was a literary journal, one was a music journal, and then a month or 2 after that, I had an email through my website from Reader's Digest, and they wanted to publish it. And so, you know, all of a sudden, I'm getting emails still now from people who see this essay that's about my music in Reader's Digest, you know, in some dentist's office, I don't know where, and this is a huge expansion, clearly, of my audience. So I've given myself permission, I think slowly over time, to incorporate all the things that I am passionate about and good at, and that has coalesced into something that's a very unique profile, I think. It has been challenging because during the time that I've been active as a musician, I think there have been biases about, having your hands in too many pots. So I think I had some trepidation about, for example, writing. If I started writing too much, did that mean that I wasn't, being a pianist? Now I've realized that the more I do, the better, and I think that that's true for all of us. And I think that is my brand. The diversity of my reach and of my voice is my brand. I think that the other challenge has been finding people to help me with that. For the longest time, I was doing all these different things, and I was realizing that they had clear connections, and I wasn't finding the support in management and PR to help me tell that story. I kept saying, I know that all these things are connected, but I also feel like I'm just doing all these things. How can we pull them together into a story that makes sense? And I have now found that solution, and it's really liberating and empowering. So I think that we're living in such an interesting time, and I know that we all have things to say about social media and the way that we tell our stories. I think one of the biggest shifts that I've seen also is the end of blah, blah, blah. You used to have to write these long descriptions of what you were doing and press releases and send out these big packets. And now we can tell stories in so many different ways. We can tell stories with an image. I think that since I've become proficient and possibly obsessive with social media, my Instagram tells a really interesting story about me that nothing else does. All these different pieces fit together, and they help to define us. So the other thing that I want to say before we go on is that the brand, the you, develops in tandem with the time in which you live. And I've experienced that full frontal in the last year because I have a project, an album out that is very much connected with our American moment. It's a record of American music that I put together in response to what was happening already 2 years ago, and who knew that we would be where we are now. But it's kind of thrust me into a place where I feel like I am, just an accidental activist. And I've taken that and I've kind of developed it and run with it, and I've realized that my art gives me this really incredible platform to speak about issues that are important, to encourage other people to speak, to encourage dialogue, to be out in the community. I'm working with young people all around the country. That's folded into who I am. That's really encouraging and exciting. And so, this is an evolution, and I think I know now where my brand, where myself is going for the next period of time, which is really assuming this mantle of the artist as activist and as communicator in a time when that's so needed.